This is an i30N Premium, and I'm going to show you why this little thing is a pocket rocket from Hyundai. You're watching The Word on Cars. My name's Nish. Let's go. But before I do, here's a little overview of the i30N. Hyundai dropped this little hot hatch on us in 2018, which was refreshed in 2021 with changes to the front and rear styling, minor changes to the interior and technology, the introduction of an 8-speed automatic dual-clutch transmission. The previous models didn't get an automatic at all, a small power and torque bump, and it's pretty much stayed the same ever since. These days, Hyundai offers 3 models in the lineup: the i30N, the i30N Premium, and the i30N Premium with sunroof, which can also be optioned with the Comfort Option Pack at no extra cost it seems, which I'll cover off when we get inside. Hyundai also offers the i30N in 4 colors at no extra cost, which is nice: Performance Blue, Shadow Grey, Atlas White, and Engine Red. All models in the lineup also get a 2-litre turbocharged 4-cylinder that sends 206 kilowatts of power and 392 Newton meters of torque to the front wheels of this shoebox that weighs a touch over 1,500 kilograms. This thing is a beast to drive. I'll show you what this can do later in the video. Now, this car being an N Premium with sunroof will set you back just under 55,500 Australian dollars drive away, which is a pretty good deal when you consider everything you get and how well it performs. But you can sweeten the deal even more if you're willing to check out the second-hand market with i30Ns like this one, which is for sale at Blinker here in Melbourne, for $44,950 drive away. And they'll even throw in an extra 3-year warranty on top of the remaining factory warranty if you tell them that you saw this one on The Word on Cars. Now, I'm a big fan of the styling of this hatch because it's out and out hot hatch. The i30N gets sporty upper and lower grills with intakes on either side that feed air to cool the front brakes and an integrated splitter. LED headlights with their own slick lighting signature, forged 19-inch wheels with red brake calipers, side skirts that say N that tie the front and rear end in perfectly, an equally sporty rear end with an aggressive diffuser with functioning tailpipes, LED tail lamps, and a high-mounted spoiler with an integrated race-inspired brake light. Oh, and on the pipes, that's right, you get a bimodal exhaust with more snap, crackle, and pop than rice bubbles. It sounds so good. Now, in the trunk, boot, whatever you want to call it, the first thing you notice is this rear brace to stiffen the back end that runs across the floor, which should tell you what this hatch is all about. In terms of space, you got a fairly deep cargo area with 381 litres, so it'll easily take 2 medium-sized suitcases back here. Under the floor, you got a space saver tire and toolkit, so there's no additional space under here unless you want to shove smaller items in and around the spare wheel. But you can drop the 60-40 split rear seats by pulling the latches on the tops of the seats to increase space to 1,287 litres for bigger or longer items, but that stiffening brace will get in the way. Does it really matter though when you get to fly around corners? Of course it doesn't. Now, let's start with the interior, but stick around until the end because you're definitely going to want to see how this little hot hatch drives. It's nuts. So, the interior. It isn't bad, but I will say that the dashboard in particular looks a little dated compared to the new i30N sedan that was spruced up a few years ago. And there are some hard plastic surfaces here and there, but the top of the dashboard and doors are soft and a little squidgy. And I love the Alcantara and leather bucket seats in this, which do need to be manually adjusted with lit up N logos, or N lights as they're called, which are super supportive and really give you the feel of being in a more hardcore sports car. They're surprisingly comfortable too, and wide enough for larger humans. But if you'd rather not have to manually adjust your seats, you can option the Comfort Option Pack, which I mentioned earlier, which replaces the Alcantara with suede and throws in electric front seats with memory settings. It's also quite spacious in here for a small hatch. The doors give you plenty of room to step in and out, and with smart keyless access, it's easy to unlock the doors as long as you have the key fob on you. And this panoramic sunroof, which can be vented or slid open for the front passengers, also opens up the cabin really well. In the front, both driver and passenger gets decent headroom, legroom, and knee room. The steering wheel does tilt and slide for anyone with longer legs. I'm 5'9" tall, so the 6-footers will still fit in here perfectly fine. So, let's talk about what we have in front of the driver. Like the seats, the i30N gets a sporty steering wheel that's fitting for a hot hatch with perforated leather on either side to make it nice and grippy, and the usual buttons on either side for media, driver assistance, and to control the helper screen in the instrument cluster. And on driver assistance, the i30N gets everything you'd expect to find in a modern car, from adaptive cruise control, active lane keeping, emergency braking, blind spot monitoring, the list just goes on. The N was never safety tested though, but the i30 was awarded a 5-star ANCAP safety rating, if that's anything to go by. Anyway, back to the steering wheel. The buttons that really stand out are these baby blue buttons for drive modes and N mode. So drive modes, fairly standard, there's normal, sport and eco to choose from. But the blue button with the checkered flag on it, that's the fun button. Pressing this button once activates N mode, which cranks up everything to the max. Press it again and it activates the custom mode, which is an individual mode you can configure to your liking. And boy, is there a lot to configure, which you do through the infotainment screen. There's a lot of performance information on screen, from a G-force meter, lap timer, and gauges which you can customize or flick between a normal view or race view. To set up an individual profile for the N button, tap Custom, which shows you aspects of the i30N that you can change, and like I said, it's bloody comprehensive. Here you can play around with engine, transmission, electronic limited slip differential, exhaust, suspension, steering, and electronic stability control settings. There's also a button for NGS, which stands for N-Grin Shift, that releases maximum power of the engine and transmission for 20 seconds to put a grin on your face. Legit. That's why it's called N-Grin Shift. I love how Hyundai has just had fun with this little hatch. And all of these settings do really change the way this hatch drives. It's really, really impressive, and you'll see what I mean when I get this out on the road. Coming back to the driver's seat, this one doesn't have a fancy digital instrument cluster or heads-up display. Instead, you get these sporty gauges which curiously look just like the gauges out of an older Audi S4. The resemblance is quite uncanny. You also get a red line that changes as the i30N warms up and gets up to operating temperature, just like the gauges on the BMW E92 and F80 M3s, and a shift light that actually works really well for perfect shifts. And like I said, you do get the standard Hyundai helper screen in the middle with the usual information, but this one also gets more performance gauges to make sure everything is working perfectly. Even though the world is going mad for digital clusters these days, I love analog clusters like this one. They're like mechanical watches. When digital watches came out however many years ago, they were all the rage. But these days, everyone wants a mechanical watch. And it's not because mechanical watches are precisely engineered. I mean, yes, some of them are, but I think it's more about the theatre than anything else. And I think these analog gauges will be the same one day. Infotainment in here is covered by this 10.25-inch touchscreen, which runs a standard Hyundai interface with a row of buttons below it, and thankfully includes a volume knob smack bang in the middle. The system works well, it's responsive and all that, and has wired Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. The one thing I don't like is the fact that Hyundai doesn't include a button to access the connected phone. There is a favorite key you can set up to be whatever you want it to be, but I've set this one up to access the N Performance page because, let's face it, that's definitely more important. So, would it be nice to get a button to access my phone? The i30N also gets a 6-speaker audio system that sounds fine, but you're probably never going to use it with this exhaust. There's also a separate panel for climate control with its own screen to sort out the dual zone climate control in here. The buttons for the heated seats and heated steering wheel sit around the gear lever, along with buttons for the parking sensors, rear view camera system, which works fine with a few different views to choose from, and traction control. The gear shifter to operate the 8-speed DCT is thankfully just an ordinary shifter, and you can flick it over to the side to bang through manual gearbox feeling, or use the paddles on the back of the steering wheel. And you also get an ordinary handbrake. You know exactly what that's for. Wink wink. Storage in the i30 isn't bad either for a hatch of its size. There's a glove box on the dash which has ample space under the dashboard with a wireless phone charger along with two 12-volt 180-watt power outlets and a USB-A port. You get two cup holders in the middle and a little more storage under the center armrest. There's also good-sized door bins with partitions for bottles and whatever else you want to throw in there, and a holder for your shades on the roof. Then there's the back seats. Like the front, it's plastic fantastic in here with the exception of the tops of the doors. The doors themselves give plenty of space to access the back seats, which are also covered in Alcantara and leather just like the front. Now, space-wise, it's not bad for what it is. There's good headroom, good knee room, and decent toe room under the front seats, which are set to my driving position. But it is a hatch at the end of the day, so even though you get 3 seats back here, 3 adults would definitely be cramped. And even though there is a hump on the floor, it does sit low and wide, so it won't get in your way. The back seats get ISOFIX points for the outboard seats and top tether mounts across all 3 seats for the kids. And there's also door bins in the back, like the front, with partitions for bottles, etc., and cup holders behind the center armrest. And no, you don't get vents in the back for rear passengers or even map pockets behind the front seats. But don't worry, no one's going to care when they see what this little hatch can do. So, driving the Hyundai i30N. Now, in normal mode, this thing gets down the road like any other car. The engine does its thing in the background, the transmission, the shifts are super smooth, the steering is nice and light and easy to operate, the suspension's comfortable, although I will say it's a little bit more on the firmer side compared to the standard suspension in an i30, but it's still compliant enough for it to be comfortable. Overall, it feels really well put together in here. But stick this into N mode and all of a sudden, you wake it up. Holy smokes. This thing just comes alive. You feel the 206 kilowatt, 392 Newton meter, 2-litre turbo 4-cylinder under the hood just wake up, and it is sensational. And because it's so small and because it sits so close to the ground, it feels so much quicker. It's like a little go-kart. It's unbelievable how fast this car is. 0 to 100 is 5.9 seconds, but it feels so much quicker than that. And the noise out of the exhaust, those pops and crackles. This thing is unbelievable. It's so responsive, it's so torquey. Now, I'll admit, there's a little bit of turbo lag, but it gets in there pretty quickly. That's ridiculous. This is crazy. Now, like I mentioned, this thing also has NGS, or N-grin shift. And what that does is basically cranks a bit of boost into the engine, drops the gearbox into the best gear possible to give you maximum power for a period of 20 seconds. And I'll tell you what, that works so well. Oh, those sounds are fantastic. How can you not love this car? It's so much fun. It's so much fun. Thank you, Hyundai, for giving us this little car. And you can just put your foot into the accelerator and it responds so quickly. And it builds speed like nothing else. I mean, this is unbelievable. Whew. I love this car. And it's the same thing with the transmission. Slide the gear lever over to get into manual mode, and all of a sudden you are in control of gear changes. This thing will let you rev it out. It does not intervene. It will not get in your way, and it lets you drive this thing the way you want to drive it. It's so quick. DCT changes gears up and down so fast, and you've also got a shift light to make sure you don't over rev this car. I can't believe this car, it can do all of this, and it works so well. The paddle shifters on the steering wheel, and I don't know if they are, but they feel mechanically weighted. They feel really, really good. You can also use the gear lever itself to bang up or down gears to give you that real manual feeling. And speaking of manuals, you can get this in a 6-speed manual, but I haven't test driven one of those, so I can't really comment on that. But this 8-speed DCT is fantastic for a car that would potentially be daily driven, but also taken out on the weekends for a bit of fun. It works so well. And I mean, the sounds, the speed. Oh boy, this car is just It's ludicrous. Then there's the suspension in the i30N, and I mean, like the rest of it, it is so well put together. You have McPherson struts up front and multi-link suspension in the back, and Hyundai has really braced the hell out of this car to make sure that they've stiffened the chassis up really nicely. You've got that rear brace that I mentioned, but it's also got bracing for the transmission tunnel and also front crossmember bracing as well, and all of that has worked really well to stiffen this chassis up nicely. And you feel it in the way that it's put together. It just feels really composed. And when you are going around a corner in this, there is so much grip. For a front wheel drive car, there is so much grip, and it doesn't understeer. I have not been able to get this car to understeer at all. Now you can play around with the N mode and customize it a little bit so that you can actually get this thing to oversteer, which is a ton of fun in a little car like this. And that's really thanks to the electronic LSD in this, which, I mean, it works so well. It's got a high-speed servo in there that's constantly making sure that you've got grip to the front wheels, and you certainly feel that. You have so much confidence when you're going around a corner in this car. It's a point and shoot. It's a point and shoot, this thing. Now, the suspension, the dampers in particular are stiff. I mean, in N mode, this thing is so stiff. It's jarringly stiff. You would not want to be daily driving this car in N mode unless you, again, fiddle around with the N mode and change the dampers to normal mode. But for some spirited driving and to have some fun, this suspension setup is fantastic. It really is fantastic. You feel everything on the road, but that's what you want. You want that feedback. You want to know what the car's actually doing. You want to feel the road, and these dampers really help you just keep this car pointed and shot in the direction you want it to go. I mean, fantastic, fantastic. The steering in the i30N is also so precise. It's so quick. It's the first thing I noticed when I got into this car. It changes direction so quickly. It responds to input so quickly. It is a fast steering rack. I mean, the front wheels change direction as quickly as you can turn the steering wheel in here. And it's so well weighted in N mode. It's heavy and it's perfect for spirited driving and to have some fun. Now, what I will say though is, being front wheel drive, on launch, this thing will torque steer. So you better hang on to that steering wheel and keep it pointed in the right direction, but it's not hard to control. But aside from that, the steering is sensational. I mean, it really helps you control this thing. It gives you so much confidence when you're pushing this thing around corners. Oh man, what a great car, what a great car. And if you thought Hyundai stopped at that, they haven't, because they've also made sure that you could slow this thing down and bring it to a stop when you need to, with 360mm vented discs up front and 314mm vented discs on the back. You've got single piston calipers on all four corners, and this braking system is really well suited for this car. I mean, it manages the 1500 kilograms or thereabouts of weight that it has. When you're coming in and out of corners, the brakes do give you that added level of confidence when you are really pushing this thing hard. You even have brake ducts to cool the front brakes for those track day sessions, or even some fun on the weekend when you're just blasting in and out of the twisties. They work so well. I mean, yet another thing that I can't believe that Hyundai has managed to squeeze into this car. And look, all of these things just work together to make this thing such a great hot hatch. It has really earned the title of hot hatch. You're a Hyundai, you shouldn't be able to do any of this. So I'm thinking it's pretty obvious what I think of the i30N. This car is like an angry little chihuahua. It may be small, but it'll bark and snarl and take the fight to the big dogs. And sure, it may lose, but it'll have a crack and it won't back down. This thing is just full of personality, and I love that. So throw out whatever you think of Hyundai, because whether you like it or not, they're kicking goals these days with cars like the i30N. Hyundai is a company that understands what people want. In the case of the i30N, it's definitely not a wannabe hot hatch. It is a hot hatch for the enthusiasts that doesn't break the bank. If you don't believe me, head down to Blinker or even your closest Hyundai dealer and take one of these babies for a spin. And make sure you take a bag of cash with you because I doubt you'll be coming home without the i30N after driving it. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please remember to like and consider subscribing to the channel. As always, thanks for tuning in. I really appreciate the love and support. Now, I'm going to get back on the road and have a little more fun in this thing before I have to hand back the keys. So I'll see all of you in the next video.